Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Are you kidding me? We're in October already. You know, Christmas is coming up, New Year's, all those New Year's resolutions and all that kind of stuff. So this month, try to do some simply snacking. You maybe pass it out for kids to give them a healthy alternative for Halloween. So anyways, enjoy October. Try to be good this month. You know what's coming, and just kind of try new stuff. Try the simply snacking beef and chicken flavors. There's a lot of good flavors out there. Maybe we'll get some extra ones for Thanksgiving next month. But thank you for listening. And again, thank you, Simply Snacking, for hosting this podcast. Hey, everyone. This is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or, medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice, because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit, and always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Hello, and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. Today's a fun one for me because I have a hero of mine, someone who I look up to as a man, as a doctor, Tony Hampton. Welcome.
Yes, happy to be here, man. This is returning the favor. You joined me on my Protecting Your Nest podcast. I really enjoyed that. So why not join you with my favorite person in the world?
Yeah, this is the awesome one. We brought the big boss in too, Karon Hampton.
Hello,
the brains behind the whole operation.
I certainly like to think so. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think that's one thing. Just meeting you both at Low Carb San Diego, actually, I had met you a couple times, but I think just spending time with you and learning as a couple, what you believe in, what matters to you, and all that, and I think it's important that people know behind the scenes, like what about how you met, life, all that kind of stuff. So I'll let the boss start out here and kind of, because the one thing I've noticed in the low carb community is the importance of marriage, the importance of having a solid foundation, behind what we're doing, and I saw that in Professor Noakes, Gary Fettke, Tro Kalasian, all these people that's a backbone of what we're doing. And how do we, it's hard when you start stepping out into different areas as a doc. We kind of follow the stay between the lines type thing, and you don't want to be noticed too much. You want to be in the middle of the pack. So Karan, what is let's go back to how you all met and how you got into the situation you're in now.
So cool. I know, right? So I really love telling the story. So Tony and I met in college. We both went to the same school. And my mom used to always tell the story, if there's a stray cat or dog, you better believe I'd be the one that'll like or love it. So Tony at the time was that stray little cat or dog. And when we first started out, I didn't like him. He had this big reputation of, his dad is this big time doctor and he's going to school to do that. And I was like, okay, whatever. Then the minute I found out, no, it's not anything like that. And I was like, this guy is really cute. He's really nice. But the one thing that got me was we were on our way to the cafeteria and Tony stopped and opened the door for me. And that was just the ultimate. I was like, wow, he's smart, he's handsome, and he's a gentleman. So it was really, really sweet. And from the rest of that, I did a summer program there, and Tony was doing research. And we stayed in the same complex, and we were really friends, which was really good. So that took like the stressors or the pressures of just, we could be silly and goofy and all of that kind of stuff together. So that was really what started our friendship. One day we had a bet and I won or he won. Probably I won on both sides because look what I ended up with. So yay. And then that kind of started us on our journey.
Yeah, Tony, what about you when you saw her? Did you go, this is the one, or was it kind of like you had to grow on each other a little bit?
It was very interesting in that we were really friends, and we had a nice little group of a lot of guys and gals, and it wasn't really expected that one of the friends would become somebody you'd be interested in. So I think just like with anything, we hung out a lot, had a lot of fun. New Orleans is such a fun city to go to school, So I mean, it's the funniest stuff in the world, and that when you think about like when we would like daiquiris was a thing, right? So I'm coming from a family where we're trying to like stay away from alcohol, and then you get to New Orleans and it's like everybody's like able to drink, because the legal drinking age when we got there was I think 18, and when we turned 21 it became 21, right? So we hung out a lot, had a good time with friends, and then one day in the summer while we were there doing summer school and research, you just start looking at somebody differently. And it was just like this spark occurred. I don't think either one of us was looking for that spark. And then we kind of just like took that and kind of kept our little romantic intent quiet for a while, because we didn't want our friends to, we didn't want to disrupt the group. So it was like really crazy. But yeah, it's been fun to have a friend initially who then turns into your wife, and somebody that kind of supports you through your journey. Even when I pledged my fraternity, which is called Alpha Phi Alpha, my wife was able to kind of support me through that, because that whole process is insane. And we just try to kind of work as a team as much as possible, but it's challenging. And when you're dealing with challenges, you just gotta, face them together. So, and one of the things I've always appreciated about Karon is that she's always been supportive. So back before I became this low carb doc, I was a vegetarian, and oh my God, what did I put our family through trying to go through that process in the name of trying to make us all healthy, right? So, and I remember, I think Karon, you'll remember that book I bought. I think it was Dr. Furman, and it was like how to disease proof for your kids, right? And so I was like, back then I was just focused on, we got to make our kids healthy, and and we did our best. But man, I bought that book, and next thing you know, I'm making tofu steaks.
Oh my goodness. I have to tell you about that one. So I'm upstairs and Tony's downstairs cooking, and we're like, okay, so we're gonna have a tofu steak. It's really, really smelled good. And we were like, oh my goodness, we're gonna have something that's similar to me. I came downstairs and I saw in this skillet this big pile of I was like, oh my. So no, can we not eat like this anymore?
Did you eat it that day? Did it taste good?
I
Or
did try it, but no,
it was just not
it was
not your
not
thing?
good
Yeah,
at all.
it's a hard thing, because a lot of us have gone through those journeys. Like my worst shape I ever was in, I was drinking. My wife was making me green shakes for breakfast with kale and spinach, but we were putting some grape juice or orange juice to make it taste good. And then my sugars are going higher. I'm doing like the all the whole wheat toast sandwiches, and pretzels because they're low fat, all this low fat stuff, and I'm gaining weight. I'm like, what is wrong with me? This is crazy. So you start, but I always appreciate going through that journey of seeing what happens, trying different foods, and at least you tried it and go, yeah, look, how long were you doing the vegetarian diet?
Tony, you did it. Tony did it for quite a while. He
Yeah,
was
it's probably
actually
7 or 8 years.
vegan with his portion of it. So the journey started because I had gestational diabetes with both of my children. Immediately after they were born, it was gone. And I tell the story of, it was very disappointing because the very first time with my oldest, when I got diagnosed, at first they were saying, oh, you're not gaining enough weight. You're not gaining enough weight. So you have to eat what? Rice, pasta, potatoes. And I did what I was supposed to do because I wanted to make sure that I was, taking care of my unborn child. And then, of course, when I got ready to go for the test, they said, oh, you have diabetes, but you did this to me. You told me to eat all this stuff. Immediately after they were born, again, it went away. First child, I was able to do it, diet control, counting the number of this. And, the second, I actually had to go on insulin, but then it was gone. And then years later, it came back as a beast. came back and doctor was like, oh, you're a convert type 1. So that's kind of started our journey to do the vegetarian and stuff like that. So Tony was like, let's make sure, that we're taking care of you. Let's make sure that we're taking care of our children. So that's kind of how we got into that space. And then looking at my sugars were not really acting right or cooperating or anything like that. And then Tony took it a step farther to investigate to see exactly what can he do. So that's when the low carb space came in, which the young men now, we're so happy because guess what? We got to eat meat.
Yeah, that's a thing for us doctors. It's such a hard thing. Even when I was looking at low carb, it was hard for me to rectify this in my brain, saying, oh, now we're eating steak and red meat and eggs and all this stuff where they say the cholesterol is going to kill you. And when you start realizing and looking behind the scenes a little bit, you think, wow, okay, there's a lot that we don't understand. And Tony, you've done a great job.
Yeah, it was very interesting because I became the vegetarian vegan doctor, right? So, and then people come to me and I'm asking them to consider the steak. So it was that was my identity. That was who I was. So it was very difficult to transition. And a lot of things, even if I think about Dr. Furman and what and I really want to say this first. I really believe that achieving metabolic health is the key. So I think that some people may do okay with that approach. If that works for them, I think that's great. It didn't work for me. I had this irritable bowel problem, and I think too much of that type of plant-based food was causing some problems at the time I didn't realize until I reflect back, and I feel so much better this way. But I believe, I think a lot of those guys like Dr. Furman, they say, no, avoid the bread. They say avoid the pasta, juices and sugars and processed foods. So I think we're aligned with that. I think where we separate a little bit, and what I learned is that meat's not harmful. Saturated fat's not harmful. Even if my LDL cholesterol goes up, it's not harmful. Dairy's not that harmful. And I don't really have to eat. My wife shouldn't be eating a lot of grains and dried fruit if it's going to raise her sugar. So I think once we started to look at the literature and understand that this may be a better model for my wife and my family, it was kind of easy to transition. But I definitely put my family through a lot of changes as we kind of did this experiment. But what really drove the change was science. And I was like, wait a minute, the science is saying that this low carb approach is just as effective, if not more effective, and I can actually eat bacon. So if I can do that and help my family achieve their goals, and then I was able to kind of transition to the clinical practice, and you just keep hearing success story after success story. Even yesterday, before we recorded, had a patient who came in. He was an Indian guy, and he basically had lost 70 pounds or so. I'll probably even have him as a future guest. And it's just, you hear the stories of healing, and you're like, man, I just couldn't get my community, just like it was hard to get my family to be plant-based. Man, trying to get an African American community to engage in that is difficult. And the irony of that is that there's a lot of people in the community who are really leaning that way because of what they hear. And in fact, literally this morning I wake up and I see CNN shared a story from the mayor of New York, and it was kind of an opinion piece. And he talked about how he was able to reverse his diabetes, and I'm definitely happy he was with plant-based diet. But the narrative is still where you shouldn't eat meat. And I think I literally want to kind of write something to respond to that, just to say you can definitely do plant-based, but it's okay to do meat-based, because I don't want people to live in fear and have information that's not serving them. Because you have organizations like Virta Health that have proven, they've done the research. Dr. Eric Westman and others have shown us that this approach is very effective and can save lives. So I just want to live in a world where people have choices and have options. That's why when I adopted this dietary approach for my family, it was kind of, we were kind of cooking two meals for a while. We were kind of I didn't want to impose my will on the family. We were able to kind of mix it in a little bit. And when my kids, even though they're kind of low carb now, when they come home, they break that rule often. I mean, they often come home and they do their thing, and they go to the local Italian restaurant or the local Mexican restaurant, and they just eat the things that everybody else eats, because we don't want to get so obsessed with this. you have to look at yourself and do what's best for you. So it's been quite a journey, to be honest with you. So
Yeah, I think
Well,
that's a really important. Oh, go ahead, Karan.
no, I was just going to say that I love it because again, we get to eat meat.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing because a lot of us, inherently I thought, plant-based has got to be the way to go initially, like way back, because you think, well, you're not eating fat, cholesterol, this, and we see you put the hamburger meat down there and you see the grease clogging the drain and you go, that must be doing that to my heart.
Right.
And it just is a connect. And what I found was I was watching, observing, but my vegan patients are often having more anxiety, stress, sleep problems, and very uptight. And I thought, I wonder if it's the diet or whether it drew those people got drawn into it. And also what you say, Tony, that I wholeheartedly agree. It's like, hey, if we can all agree the processed food is the issue, let's get rid of that as much as possible. Then you're going to fall to one end of the extreme. Some people are going to be carnivore, some people are going to be vegan or vegetarian. Hopefully if you eat eggs or something like that, that you just get that protein and you get it. I mean, it's a challenge. Like we had a speaker at the conference, and I like her a lot, and she's vegan, and she was talking about how I was thinking, I couldn't be like, you have to measure this and measure that. And people go, man, I can't even like turn on the barbecue. How am I going to measure all this stuff and figure out how much lentil and how much of this to try to do it? It's really difficult to cut your carbohydrates that way and get enough protein. And so that's an issue. But I think what we can all agree on is like, let's cut out the processed junk food with all the artificial colors and all the additives and glyphosate and all those kind of things, and try to focus more on real food. And then if you want to go more towards plant-based, go that way if you feel better that way and you're doing great.
yeah, it was, I think for us, and Karan, you can comment on this, it was a little bit more labor intensive when we were plant-based, because you can't just walk into the average restaurant. And we did have a couple of vegetarian vegan restaurants that were near us, but you can't, it's hard to like manage that. And don't get me wrong, low carb can be a challenge. You have to kind of tweak it as well. But I found it was more difficult. So we had to cook more, which is okay. We cook a lot now, ironically, anyway, but it's just easier. And I, and I remember when we went to one of the family reunions, Karan, you remember when we were vegetarian, and and I was kind of like the main guy they were trying to, cater to. So I get there and you see all of this great food, and then they say, oh yeah, don't worry, we got something for you, right? And so I get to the meal and it was literally a salad with like nothing. It was just a big pile of lettuce, right? So it's like, yeah, we got you, and you got, and I was like, well, actually, that's not exactly how I eat. But so it was difficult to manage those different scenarios. And again, we still do that now when our family knows that we need to have non-starchy vegetables as options from a low-carb perspective. They know that we don't want the barbecue sauce on our meat. So you're always navigating. So no matter which path people take, but I agree with you that it is a challenge to, I wasn't taking, I took probably 6 or 7 people. I either reduced medicines or took people off medicine the previous week of this recording. In 1 week, it was like 7 people. You either reduced or took them off. And it took me 19 years to take 1 or 2 people off medicine as a clinician before I started. So clearly, and that's while I was also advocating for the plant-based diet. So I just think that the results are what they are, anecdotal or not. And I'm just excited that, I'm able to kind of do this work. It was inspired by my wife and her journey, but now we're kind of working in partnership and trying to help people. So that's why I'm excited that she's joining me.
And the cool part about, I guess, the low carb and just learning, because of Tony has kind of put us in that space, is that as a pharmacist, I get to bring that to the patients that I serve, the community that I serve as well. I mean, because I am diabetic, then when someone comes, as opposed to prior to, I hate to say, a pill pusher, but now my counseling is just a little bit different. If I see someone, I'm counseling on insulin, or I'm counseling on the metformins or different things like that. Because of the organization that I work for, there's a grocery store there. So I get to look to see what's in their basket, and I get to come at them from a not a judgmental point, but from a friendly point of saying, let's just see what's in your basket. Let's calculate, how much sugar or, and the carbs and stuff like that. And it is a teaching and learning experience. And I find that most of them are excited and happy about that. So definitely supportive as far as when Tony's learning something new, I'm excited. And then of course, when he tells me, as he always states, you cannot unlearn something. So when I learned that this has sugar in it, but I really liked it, now I got to change.
Yeah, I
change
think
that.
that's a huge thing, is the educational component. And I see that a lot. There's a lot of pharmacists now stepping over and saying, hey, look, let's do some clinical work. Let's sit and work together, because you're the experts on taking people off medicines. You know all the side effects and the problems. And a lot of times we'll see someone come in with a big, huge medicine list, and then we realize, oh, that's because of the side effect of this medicine. Now, now you don't need that medicine anymore. So when we take people off of blood pressure medicines, for instance, oh, the swelling in their feet went away too. And all these other things that happen when we get metabolically healthier, it's pretty amazing.
Right,
And
definitely.
even how we our mood. So even if we were to, like you mentioned, how important it is to have this space to talk about relationships. And when the mood's more stable because your sugars are not up and down, then the relationship's more stable. How you interact with your kids is more stable. How you interact with your coworkers is more stable. And how you interact with my father-in-law, who's suffering from dementia, is more stable. So I think the effects of being able to have a diet that keeps you kind of calm and level has downstream effects that you don't even think about. And a lot of the people that we talk to, friends, family, and others, they say, man, I'm just easier to be around. My wife's happier, and vice versa. So it's been really important for us to kind of experience that. But the most important thing is this idea of continuous learning. And I think as a couple, what's helped us the most is that we're not, people may look on the outside and say they're in a perfect relationship, like we thought, Bill Cosby was with the Cosby Show, right? So we thought it was, it's not perfect, nothing's perfect. But what we want to do is, what can we do to work on working towards perfection? Even when I get a young couple in front of me, they're like, everything's perfect, we're good, no worries. And what I found is that successful people are always still trying to improve upon that. So one of our favorite resources when we started learning about relationships was that 5 Love Languages book. We kind of went through that together, and I was able to learn a little bit about Karon. I don't know if she's going to share a love language today, and but I'll share mine. And mine's words of affirmation. So once she understood that I needed to have those words of affirmation, she gives that to me so that I feel whole and I feel loved. And I think that we have to figure these things out for each other. So I think people have to want to be better. Couples have to want to do better. And that's one of the biggest tips I would give anybody who gets a chance to hear our voices. It's not, you have to work on these things. We're not just born with these gifts of, how to be a good dad. I mean, that's why I was reading this, How to Disease Proof My Kids book. I had no clue that what to do. So I had to start reading these experts who were advising me. And I remember, Karan, how I remember when the kids, one of the books I read taught us how to, I can't think of the name right now, but it talked about how to get the kids to go to sleep, right? So I read this book and it said you have to just put them in a room, tell them you love them, and basically let them kind of soothe themselves. And she thought I was like the worst man on the
Oh,
planet.
he was, Brian. Our oldest at the time, one morning I got up and he was actually lying on the floor outside of our door, and that just hurt my heart.
Yeah, I know the book, and the 5 love languages. I think that is for me. I think that is one of the big um, changes in my life. That really, as a matter of fact, I was going through med school, and Linnell would, I come home and I'm exhausted. You know how it is, Tony, you're exhausted, you're beat up from being in the hospital all this time and emotionally drained. And she's in the kitchen cooking the whole time. I'm like, what are you doing? Just sit down and let's talk. Right. Cause my love language will a few, I think, but like physical touch and quality time, just sitting there and talking like this is my love language right here. Right. And so other people, it's acts of service. And so my wife is acts of service. So if I come home and go, hey, you know what, sit down, let me do the dishes, you relax, honey. and that's her love language. But her acts of service, so she was cooking and doing all this stuff, planning my meals and everything because she loves me, and that's how she showed her love. So there's so many relationships if they can figure out, oh, words of affirmation. Tony, you look great. Look at you. You did a great job today. And that's a big deal. I could bring you a present. You don't care. One of my daughter's gifts is her thing. So she wraps it all up and she does it. And you can see, like, if you stand back at people and you observe, and it seems so silly, but you realize, oh, that's how they show love. They do it this way. Okay. That's how they want to be loved back. And then you kind of figure each other out. So
Right.
are we going to find the boss's love language today?
Well, my love language is actually physical touch. Yes. But to Tony and his love language right now, hey, way to go. You got this. I love you.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
amazing how and it's funny because when we don't understand each other, it's like, why is Tony always want me to give him a compliment? Like, why is that? All right. But then when you understand, like, oh, that's why I get my, I don't care about titles and all that stuff, but we sit down and talk and I could really get to understand you. And then I feel loved and I feel heard and understood. And I think, that carries over into medicine and all that. You figure out what's important to that person, right? Really what matters. And having encouragement and support and whatever it might be, and I think in a marriage relationship that's the huge thing of understanding your partner and how to love them, because I see how you two look at each other and I was like, man, these two are in love. I knew it right away, right? I mean, you can sense that. You can't fake that.
Right.
So and
And
you
it's
say,
hard
gosh,
because people think that, I think even having learned those love languages, I think a lot of people still kind of default back to their love language, and they still want to kind of put their love language on the other person when that's not their love language. So I think the biggest thing you have to do is just let that go, and just once you discover, I think in the book, it only has like 2 pages. So if their love language is this, then you do that. It's very simple, and you just have to practice applying it. And we're still working on that. This is not something you read and you figure out. You have to keep practicing, because we tend to default back to what we have felt is necessary for us to feel love. So I mean, like I say, I love learning these things so that it kind of adds to our relationship, because we just want to be happy. We just want to, exist, do our thing with the kids, family, work, but then you just want to be happy. And it's hard to be happy if people don't feel loved. So we're constantly working on that. So it's been kind of a fun journey. So
It has been. And Brian, we had to kind of redefine what our love was, because when our young men went off to school, we had to learn each other again. So that was challenging. I love to say, opportunities for growth that we had to do. So it was exciting. And now we have, don't want to say my other child, but my father, now that we have to, kind of redefine how we are or interact with each other as well. So if anyone says that marriage is easy, it's not.
No. And I also think they should have coaching. So it's okay to get a relationship coach or a therapist. And you're right, we didn't anticipate having her dad with us. Literally right when the kids were kind of transitioning out, he was transitioning in. So we've had to even use more resources. And I think having life coaches and things like that, they give you tools. And one of the other favorite books of ours is by Gottman, which is the 7 Principles of Marriage. We actually walked through some of our relationship in a slightly different way, because she gave me this great gift. It was a book, and it was a cartoon of both of us. So my 100th episode of Protecting Your Nest podcast, we kind of walked through that book. And in that book, we also shared that the Principles of Marriage were one of the books that we use by Gottman. And just if I can think of an example, like they have these 4 horsemen in that book. And one of the things that one of the 4 horsemen is criticism. So sometimes, every relationship is going to have a problem. And when the problems occur, it's easier to just blame your partner and look at their flaws as the cause of the problem. So one of the things that I need to do better is to wash my wife's car, for example, right? So I think about that as an example. So, she may come to me and say, why don't you wash my car? You must not care about me, right? And And that's kind of criticism, but it's probably better to approach that by saying something like, when you get a chance, make sure you get to my car, as opposed to being critical. And so, so what I like about learning is that it gives you tools to navigate when you're dealing with life, because life's going to give you problems. So the question is, are we going to turn our little problems into big problems, or are we going to learn how to talk to each other in a respectful way? And that's why these tools are so important. And if anybody thinks they're going to figure this stuff out on their own, and you may, some people, sometimes you read this stuff and you're like, oh, I am like that, I am doing that well. And then other times it's just like motivational interviewing, Brian. Like, we are naturally, even as, like, I'm a family doc, so I kind of naturally know how to talk to people, maybe different than a surgeon. Shout out to all the surgeons, right? But it's just built into who I am, and maybe I chose that profession. But it's also nice to have motivational interviewing, so you can kind of have a tool to remind you, this is how you approach a patient encounter. This is how you, and I just think that why not learn or remind yourself of how to do it a way that has been proven to be effective? And I think we've used these tools to help us to strengthen our marriage. And so when things get a little bumpy or very bumpy, we have something we can lean on. And it may be, again, a life coach, somebody that can say, hey, I see how you're seeing the world, but had you thought about how Karon's seeing the world? And then by putting those thoughts together, you don't even have to agree, but you need to at least have seen her lens. How does she see the world? So it's been extremely helpful. Yeah.
One of the things that we were also told later in our relationship, our marriage, is to have a marriage motto. So that was really nice to sit down and write a marriage motto. So it's a long list of, things that we appreciate, but I someone that likes to make things a little simple. So I turned it into CAPS, which is communication, appreciation, partnership, which leads to strength and stability. So as long as we have our caps on, then we should be okay.
Tony, is that where you get all your acronyms from? My goodness, look at that.
Yeah,
It's so great.
Man.
It's so
I don't
great.
know
Protect
if
your
I
nest.
started or she, and that's the only way she knows I'm going to remember it. So.
Yeah, but it's so great. But you're showing that it's not just you go into marriage and it happens, you're reading books, and it's funny because I was thinking the same thing. We're both doctors and we don't understand nutrition. We don't understand health because we have to go look at books and try to figure out, like, how do I make my kids healthy? And we're in the healing profession, and then you start realizing, gosh, there's a lot we don't know, and just, I think it's important too. So how long were you dating before you got married?
I think about 4. I think if you think it's about 4 years, maybe 4 to 5 years. Yeah, I think it was about 4 years before we got married, because the timing was perfect. I think couples should definitely take these things slow, but we were at that point. My mom was like, "So when are the grandkids coming?"
Yeah, same
So
thing.
we were just, I was off to medical school. She was finishing pharmacy school. So the timing of when we started dating, I think it was the summer after sophomore year, maybe.
Yes.
And then, so the timing of us just about finishing college, starting medical school, her kind of finishing it was perfectly timed for us.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. You were both busy doing your career paths, and for some people it grows them apart. For me, my wife and I dated 8 years because I said, look, I'm going to med school and I know the numbers, I know the divorce numbers, and I want to make sure we got this right, and that you're gonna, when I'm gone for 3 days, that you can deal with that, and having kids, and it was a challenging time. But we appreciate each other, I think, maybe that much more, because when you don't see each other every night, every day, you think, gosh, you have more appreciation for each other, or especially when you're going through stressful times like that. Yeah. How was that for you going through med school?
Oh, man.
Residency.
Well, it was, I think Karon really was that stable rock. And we did live in the Chicago land area. My mom and my father-in-law, we call him Papa Ed, they're here. So her, she basically became my mom's best friend. So that helped her to kind of do her thing. Obviously, the kids kind of show up eventually, but her she kind of had to hold down the fort, because when you're a resident doctor, you're so busy. And she has pictures of me literally laying on the couch and the baby in my arms, but I'm sleeping and the baby's awake, It's like,
Yeah,
so it
yeah.
was
Same
just
thing. I
like,
got the same pictures, right? We're
yeah.
exhausted, you're beat up. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Right.
she really held down the fort, and because of that, it really helped. The problem I had was I was so busy. I was, I'm a family doctor. I delivered babies, and I mean, my God, we had to take 2 cars everywhere because you didn't know when you're going to get called, and so there was a lot of sacrifice on her behalf, and I think a lot of times because you're busier, like she's a pharmacist, so she's busy. The problem with being a doctor is that you bring your work home. So you're busy at work and you're busy at home. And a lot of times she's having to kind of manage the kids and the home while you're trying to catch up on your work while you're at home. So it's a lot of sacrifice that came from the beginning years. And part of what we're trying to navigate now, and it's still hard. It's not like I'm still not busy. She's doing her thing. She's also into acting. So she's a pharmacist acting. We got her dad. The kids are still, I mean, literally
Singing,
all of that,
all that.
singing.
You
She's
got a
talented
talented
now.
one.
She's
Yeah.
talented. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Even last night, what did our oldest son send us? He's writing an article for the paper, and he needs us to edit, look at
Proofread
the
and
article and
edit. Yeah.
proofread it. And this is like a 25-year-old kid, so it never ends. So you're always trying to say, well, where do we fit ourselves into this equation? And what we're hoping to do over the next year as we transition with the kids doing their thing is that's why we're going to see a movie today. We're trying to get back to being a couple instead of business partners, so that we can reignite that fire. So it's going to be work, but I think we're going to have to be very intentional about it and just prioritize each other over all of these other things. We're trying to save the world and make everybody metabolically healthy, right? And she's kind of joining me on that. But I think that if we don't make sure the foundation is solid, then there's, that could be an unhealthy way to proceed. So I'm really excited about the future. It's actually a pretty exciting time, Brian, because, people should be happy that now they have raised these great kids, and now you have a chance to get back to what started it. So it's actually a pretty exciting time, to be honest.
It is exciting. And Brian, going back to Tony delivering babies, our youngest was actually the last child that he helped to bring into the world, which was pretty unique. Yes.
Wow, that's really cool. That's a lot of pressure, man.
That I know, but it wasn't intentional. It's just that the nurse at that time wasn't measuring correctly. Heart rate starts to drop, and yeah, doctors wasn't there. So he's like, let's cut the cord and let me get my baby. I do remember that.
Yeah, one thing you don't want to be is a doctor's family. My wife had complications with our youngest too, and
Right.
with our oldest too. She wanted, baby
Wow.
turned breech, and her water broke, and it was like a big deal. She had to end up having to get a crash C-section, and then the second one was a vaginal delivery after a C-section, and
Oh,
so that was a
wow.
little intense. And plus her epidural wasn't in the right place, so the baby was drugged up when she came out and all that.
Oh,
So
wow.
anyways, those kind of things that we deal with as doctors, and people don't realize that and especially when you know all the things that can go wrong, it's not as much fun. You know what I mean?
It's
Right.
not, and
Uh,
I was a little lucky because as a family doctor, I had done a fellowship for maternal. It's called maternal child health, where you get more experience in peds and high risk OB, and you do C sections and tie tubes and DNCs and things like that. But I had literally was just finishing that training, so I had just spent a year or so doing high risk OB, right? So my brain was it was just what you said. I knew what could go wrong, but I also knew that there was no time to waste. So I'm not going to run down the hallway to find a resident doctor who was probably going to be even more nervous because I wasn't attending. So I said, let me just do this myself. And it worked out perfectly. But but again, as we tell our kids, I brought you into the world and I can take
I'll
you
take you out.
yeah,
out.
just looking at you, Tony, because I know you have background in looking at functional medicine, all these different obesity medicine, all these different things I'm thinking, man, I'm so busy. I don't have time to look into all these other things. And sometimes it gets thrown at us because we learn, more and more, and you go, oh, gosh, I wonder what the gut microbiome's like. And you're one of the only guys I know that are talking about, you and I are talking about similar things. It's kind of interesting that you start saying, oh, maybe this matters. Maybe this is important. And then you kind of dive into it and learn, and you have this learning mind. And also in your relationship, that's why it's not luck of the draw. Obviously you're connected, but there's work that goes into it. And a lot of people, and sometimes, there's a fine line, because sometimes and you've seen it too in marriages where it's all work all the time, and it's all like obligation, there's conflict and problems all the time. And you go, can't you guys just go to the movies and have fun and relax and not worry about all this stuff for a little while, and especially in medicine, I think we're a different breed, where we want
Yeah.
to fix the problem right now and move on and not deal with it,
It's the root cause. Like we're as we work as a couple to strengthen our marriage and model for our kids what that looks like. We have to think like a functional medicine doctor, what's the root cause of why we struggle when we struggle as a couple. And so so even the principles of functional medicine I try to apply in my marriage, and so instead of making assumptions about why things are the way they are, I try to understand. Let's go backwards. Let's keep peeling the layer. Let's try to understand why she may feel this way or why I'm reacting this way. And then by doing that, it allows you to pause for a moment, right? And just by pausing just for a little bit, you can take a deep breath and say, okay, I understand now better because I paused why things are the way they are. Now, if you go back to the old version of me, I would get defensive. So whenever there was criticism coming my way, I would get defensive. And when I become defensive, I had to over explain everything, try to explain the reason why I can't be home is because this person was depressed or this person was having chest pain. I really wanted to be home, and you're just defending. And I think that's another one of those four horsemen. So instead of becoming defensive, I try to, I want to be accountable, and I want to, instead of playing victim, I try to say, hey, I just explain things differently, and I'm still trying to get this right. So
we might be related, Tony, man, because the stuff you're
Oh,
talking about
really?
is the same thing me. It's like, okay, here's why this happened. I have to explain it all away and say, this is what happened. This is what, and instead of saying, yeah, you're right, I get why you're upset because we're supposed to be somewhere, whatever. I think there's so much of that. And I love when you said it earlier, it hit me when you're saying, looking at the lens of someone else's eyes. Because for me, I'll say, well, that's dumb. Why are you offended by that? And they go, well, here's why. And you go, here's what happened to me, and having friends, different races or coming to the United States later, I understand, like, oh, I see why you feel that way. I've never experienced that, so I don't know, and there's so many things out there right now where, we may not have experience that someone else has. So I try to look at it through their lens too and go, I may not agree with you, but I see why you're reacting this way.
Yeah, I'm even
One of
looking
the
at Karon.
things,
Go ahead, Karon.
one of the things that I like is a weekly check-in, just to see how our relationship is going for that week. So I think that's pretty good, just to say, okay, let's check in just to see where we are, because on one hand, I may have a good week or Tony may not. And then we have what Tony and I do on a daily basis is ask each other, what was your stressors for the day? And the stressors are not dealing with our marriage, but just dealing with stressors on the outside, so that, he'll have someone to come to sit and talk to about, well, today's my stressor was maybe I had this difficult patient, or maybe the computer system went down or something like that, just to make sure that someone is there to listen, to hear what that issue or that opportunity of growth is for that day.
And then you may be able to be sensitive to that, because I've had times like that. I get home and I'm just emotionally spent, difficult news for patients, whatever, those kind of conflict things. The computer's not working, you have to work late. And then, you walk in the door and my wife's like, oh, the computer's not working and there's a leak under the sink. And then you're like, oh gosh, like,
Right.
it's like, but sometimes I say, hey, look, I had a really rough day. Let's sit and relax for a few minutes. Then we'll get into the business side of things. Just having that little bit of a mental break is really important. And I think understanding it's like, okay, she's on edge because she's having a lot of problems at work. They're changing her work hours, whatever it might be. And then you understand that, yeah, they're going through a stressful, because when you're both going through a stressful time, that's when problems happen, because you both aren't meeting each other's needs because you're stressed and you don't know why. And it's not necessarily the marriage. It could be what's happening outside the marriage, at work or with the kids or whatever.
And I'm looking at Karon's like face right now, right? You look beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same, but I didn't want to get in trouble with Tony.
Thank you.
I would have returned the favor as soon as I saw your wife. But I'm gonna tell you something. What I bring that up to say another thing I had to learn from a life coach was I need to look at my wife when I'm talking to her. Like sometimes when I was in my explaining mode, I'm just explaining. And what I found is sometimes she get a stone face. She's not even listening to me at a certain point. But if I can look at her and see her body language, and if I saw that she was starting to not pay attention or just kind of tune out, then I can reframe things or take a break. So those little tips I did not know myself. And I'm sitting there, spending like 10 minutes explaining something, and nothing. It's like listening to the Charlie Brown teacher, womp, 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 womp. She's not hearing anything. So these little nuggets of help, information will take what may be a marriage that's, okay, but could be better into a phenomenal marriage, because you're now connecting, and you may have been raised a certain way or learned certain principles, but you may then tweak it just a little bit. And you're being one thing that we started doing also is we say, so do you want me to listen or give advice? So when she comes home and she's fussing about something at work or me doing that, we always ask, do you want advice or do you want me to listen? Because us
Look at the
guys,
wisdom. Of course. Of course. That's awesome, because we want to fix the problem. Like my friend's doing that. I was like, well, why don't you just do this and this? She goes, no, I just want to tell you what happened. Like, I just listen. And I'm like, well, all you have to do is tell them this and go, do it this way. That's a solution. It's an easy solution. It was like, well, I don't want a solution. This is what happened. I just want you to hear me right now. So that's great advice for sure.
Yeah. And so Karon, what are we going to be doing a lot of in the future? I'm hoping what we used to do with the kids, like all the time, which is
travel.
Yes. I can't wait for that. We used to travel, man. I think like every couple of months we would take a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or just a Friday and just go somewhere. And it didn't, instead of going all the way to California where you are, which is more expensive, etc. Although we love California, we would just go to the Wisconsin Dells, which is like a couple hours away. So we want to get back to those types of memories and create some moments to hold on to. We got to start filling our cup a little bit. And I'm really excited about that as well, because that was like a lot of, I really missed that stuff, man.
Yeah, just a little 3-day trip away from the house and say, oh, I got to go work in the garage. I got to do this. And, we have so many responsibilities. Sometimes just being away, like in the mountains for a weekend, just 3 days, just overnight. We've had overnight for our anniversary. We go, let's just go overnight. And, we have a lot going on. Let's just go and hang out for the night. Just being away for 1 night or 2 nights or 3 nights, whatever you can do. Because as doctors, I think it's we have such demands on our time. And we really have to prioritize that. And, one thing I was always blessed with and gifted at was, okay, I come home, time with the kids, time with my wife and kids. And I'm not talking about work. I'm not talking about those things, and kind of trying to compartmentalize, because if you're at home, but, and a lot of people, my wife has already said this, is that, a lot of people come home and they go up and they're on the computer or they're looking at whatever, surfing the net, and they don't really engage at all. Or they'll sit and watch TV all night and never engage. They just watch TV and they go to bed the next day. And instead of saying, hey, how was your day today? What's going on? Talking to the kids and really understanding where they're at. And I think also in our profession, I think we probably have one of the highest divorce rates so we're outliers. I don't know what the exact numbers are now, but, I was just looking at statistics on physician burnout, and you think, wow, like 68% of all doctors are burned out. So the chances are, people listening, that your doctors are one of those burned out people, struggling at work, struggling in relationship, maybe drinking too much and, not taking care of themselves. And they're supposed to be taking care of you. And I think that's the kind of the situation I was in at my old practice. And I realized I had to make some changes. And so you and I have both made changes along those ways too.
Yeah, we had to. And when you hear one of my previous podcast guests gave the stat about suicide, the suicide rate was extremely high for doctors as well. And I think Gottman gives some statistics about divorce. I know it's 50% for everybody, and 70% for the second marriage. So, and those numbers are higher for people who are clinicians. So I think when you factor those things in, it's almost, it should be required that we have a way to help make marriages stronger, make parenting stronger, helping people to find a way to just improve. And if we don't put those things in place, then people suffer. And if you think about the research that's been done, if Gottman's done research on how to make marriage more effective, and they can literally sit with you for 30 minutes and have a 91% accuracy to predict whether or not you're going to have a successful marriage. Like 91%, it's just research, and we're evidence-based, right? If that exists, and to not have a resource like that available to people is just shameful. So we have to, again, that's why I kind of, I remember when I was at low carb, or should I say the Metabolic Symposium.
Metabolic Symposium, yeah.
Changed the name because we honor our vegans and our carnivores. And one thing I do on that stage is I always talk about resources, because I, in a short podcast, in a short 15, 20-minute patient encounter, there's just not enough time. So you just want to make sure people have something to refer back to, so that they can then get those resources and then apply them and practice over and over again until they get to what we hope to be a more ideal state. So it's been just knowing those stats about, like you did when you were thinking about your marriage. If you know that there's risk here, then let's mitigate the risk somehow. And I think that that's what I ask anybody to do, because you don't have to be in that, even when it comes to being healthy, if only 7% of us are metabolically healthy, you don't have to be in that 93% category. There's just simple things that you can do, and the information is out there. We just got to make sure people get that information.
So I want to also talk a little bit about the backside of Tony. You guys are seeing him as Dr. Hampton, keto, low carb, metabolic guy. So he's also goofy. And one of the things that I love about him is, a lot of times we're lying in bed and I'm like, can you tell me a story? So he will absolutely make a story up for me to tell me a story he has, and it has to be something with a happy ending, and it cannot be gory or scary, because I'm not big on scary movies.
So does he put you to sleep?
Well,
I mean,
the stories are really, really nice. His voice is just really soothing. So I love that about him. So yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, as an aside on that, it's funny because when we were at the conference, a lady came up to my wife. She was like, I sleep with your husband all the time, right? and my wife said, what? Like she kind of laughed. And she said, you know what? His voice puts me to, like, I'll listen to the podcast, I fall asleep. And I was like, and she goes, it's either him or Tony Hampton. I'm like, yeah, Tony calms me too. Like Dr. Unwin, there's certain people there, Tony, you're so calming, right? So I might call you, go, Tony, I can't sleep, man. Can you? You're a couple hours ahead of me, so you may not be happy if I call you at 2 in the morning. Yeah, but that's it. Okay. What about Karon? You got to say something nice about her now too.
Oh man, like well,
I know there's a list. I know.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, the things that Karon does, and most of it is, although my love language is words of affirmation, I think this acts of service thing is like incredible. I mean, it's the simplest thing, man. It's like, I don't know when you started doing this, but when it must have been around sometime after the pandemic. So since the pandemic, a couple of clinicians in my office started wearing scrubs. So a lot of times when you see me record podcasts, sometimes you'll see me wearing scrubs. And that's because, and I spent a fortune. So first of all, Karon is very money conscious. So she can have $100 in her pocket, and you would think she got $1 in her pocket. The way she interacts with the world, she's very, very efficient with that. And so when the pandemic started, I started wearing scrubs, save money at the cleaners, which is why I brought that up. But I literally wake up in the morning, shower, and when I go back to the little area at the end of our bed, she always has my clothes like laid out like perfectly. And so I can grab my clothes, and then I'll put them on, I'm good to go. And sometimes even on a non like work day, I'll go to the front of my bed and she'll have my clothes laid out, and it won't be scrubs. It may be, a different outfit. And so and it's at the point now where I just expect to see my clothes, and it's just crazy. So that's an act of service, but it just, one day when it happened on a weekend when I wasn't expecting it, it just warmed my heart, because that somebody's got your back. We celebrate 29 years of marriage. We just did recently, and so we've been together for like 34 years or so. And you're like, wow, this person who I've been with all these years, they just know who I am, they know what my needs are, and they make sure that they're there. And so it's just nice to have somebody who's got your back all the time. And it's the little things that matter, for all the guys out there, you don't have to spend a ton of money. It's the little things you do that, and again, we're all still getting better at that, but I'm learning that that's what matters. And it's nice to have a person who can help you along your way, because we're busy, we got a lot we're trying to do, and yet you have somebody that's kind of there to kind of help you with those little things, because it may take me a little time to get my clothes together, but she takes care of that for me. So I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Yes. Yeah, that's thinking about you and saying, hey, oh, that would be nice. Let me just do that. And little things like that. My wife does all those things too. And you think, wow, it's so nice of you. Like that. I was even, for me, I hate going to like the store, and I hate going like if I have to mail something up, I'll go, honey, can you mail this out for me? I don't have time. And she takes care of those little things that you don't think about, So yeah, it's amazing. So now I have to ask both of you, who should go first? I'm gonna make Karan go first. What's
Okay.
life's best medicine for you? Where do you go? What keeps you going in the hard times? What keeps you, what do you lean on? What matters? These kind of important things, like if your kids go, Mom, what really matters to you? What's important? What advice
Well,
would you give us?
mine is first and foremost God. I am faith driven all the way, believer. So yeah, so whenever there's difficult times, dropping on my knees and praying, or just even in the car, I'm driving, I'm having a bad day or anticipating, I always start it with a prayer. So I'm constantly talking to God all the time. And I'm constantly praying over my marriage, over my children, and for any and everyone else that has said anything to me about their having any difficulties or opportunities for growth. I'm praying for them as well.
That's
So that
amazing.
is my go-to.
That's
Yeah.
my go-to too. And I think that's so amazing because, a lot of people, as a matter of fact, the big reason I started this podcast is I said something on Twitter during the heat of the pandemic and said, hey, keep your faith, keep your hope, keep one step at a time. Things will get better. And people say, how dare you say that things are going to get better? They're never going to get better. It's always going to, like, it's not always going to be like this, because we have faith that it's going to get better. But I was amazed. For 3 days, I got attacked on Twitter by atheists saying, hey, what are you talking about, faith and hope? There's none of that. It's a dark world and all. And you think, wow, that's a hard place to live. And I can't really, in a few characters on Twitter, explain that too, but maybe I can give a testimony of a few people who can tell you how they got through the hard time of losing a leg or whatever happened, or losing a spouse, and how they got through it and what they leaned on, because that became a trend that we would see with our patients that we interviewed on Low Carb MD, that they leaned on faith when they were really, really at the bottom of the pit somewhere, and I think that's so important for people to hear. So I thank you for sharing that.
No problem. Yes, I love it. I love the fact that I know that there's a higher being that's looking over me, that no matter what the problem is, the difficult situation, that all I got to do is just keep the faith, pray, and ask, and it shall be given. So I love that.
Awesome. Tony?
And she's not being dishonest about that at all. I remember the first night we spent together as a couple, just in the same place, and she made me get on my knees before we laid down. I was like, wait a minute, what is this all about? So she is absolutely living her faith, and it's really been nice to be in a relationship, because I actually didn't grow up in a very spiritual home. There was a belief in God, but we weren't like practicing as a lot of folk do. So I do appreciate what she added to my life when it comes to that. For me, it's about, waking up every day and feeling like I'm living my life purpose. And, what are my what do I believe in? What do I value? And am I honoring that? Am I actually doing that every day? And I encourage everybody to do the same. And actually, even when I think about me being a father, a husband, or even standing before an audience talking about low carb, I just live in my purpose. So if I can stay within my purpose, then I'm not nervous as much, a little bit, when I'm on the stage. If I'm living within my purpose, I feel like I'm okay in terms of how I father my kids or how I've been as a husband. And so I just try to tap into that whenever I think about my day-to-day activities. Even today, as we share our story, to me, that's part of my purpose, is to help people see the world through a different lens. And as long as I'm doing that, I feel like I'm doing okay. And that's kind of where I stand. And it's made my life so much easier and calmer. And I think the last day I live on this planet, I'll feel like, okay, I've done what I've come to do. And I just want to make sure everybody else out there does the same.
Yeah, it's awesome. And you're making such a huge impact. And I think, just on marriage, talking about marriage, the importance of marriage and family, and, raising your kids the way you did, because, all that time you spent with them would be money you'd be spending now on counseling for the kids, right? You don't realize just not having a father present or a mother present in the life, or having role models and stepping up in the community and doing the right thing, even though it's challenging. Because I know when you start low carb, you're like, well, where are my people around here supposed to go get, there's no fruits and vegetables at the store. How are they going to buy it? Everything is the box stuff. And when you start having a vision like that and saying, okay, store owner, I can send you business and help your business, but here's what you got to do, right? And trying to figure out how to make that happen, because so many of us see the problem, but we say, okay, it's too big of a problem, I'm not dealing with it, it's too much, I can't do it. But I think those things, when you say there's a purpose, I got to help people, how do I make that happen, and step out, and you started your own podcast, you started doing things in the community, and you're making a huge impact. Like, hearing you speak, and I always love what you're talking about, because I always learn from you and what you're looking at. So let me look at that too. And so, but I think the most important thing is you have this strong foundation. Your foundation is strong in your marriage and faith and life and kids and all those things. And you realize everything else is secondary to that, what we do in the community. Like, if we're not strong at home, we're not going to be effective in the community either. We have to figure those things out behind the scenes. And, you could be as successful as you want and get all the acclamation, acclaims and all those kind of things, even though you like that. It's one of those things, say, okay, if I'm not doing well at home, then all that other stuff doesn't matter. How many awards you get, and if you're doctor of the year and all those kind of things, there's sacrifices that, when you start realizing what really, really matters. And that's why I'm so glad to have you both on the podcast, because I think it's going to speak to a lot of people and help them to really reassess where they're at in life and what matters.
Baby, I want to say three things. One is, thank you for joining me today. I love you, and I appreciate you so much for kind of joining us as we share these messages. So I just want to say that, number one. Number two, thank you, Brian, for giving me some words of affirmation. I do appreciate that. So I'm feeling warm and fuzzy right now. And lastly, I owe you, because this goatee is because of you.
Yeah, look at that. We both got a little gray on the bottom there. Yeah, I'm like, all right, very good, man. You're looking good. Yeah, you're looking good.
And then my wife loves those.
One day I'm going to shave it and I'll go, wow, you look young, Brian. Yeah, you'll see, man. Then you could use that. When I go to Guatemala, I have to shave it. I'm like, wow, I look really young again. What happened?
Stop it, guys. Stop it. I think the goatee thing is just great. So I love that Tony has that. And no, and that is not a part of my language, but I love that. I guess it could be a part of acts of service, because it's something that I like to see on him. And so thank you.
Yeah, my wife made me grow mine too. I shaved, she goes, grow it back. I'm like, okay, I'll grow it back.
I really like your wife.
I know, she loves you both. And one of these days we'll all four come together and talk about marriage and life and all that kind of stuff. I think it would be great. And then, so Tony, how do people find you, Dr. Hampton, if they want to track you down?
Yeah, I think it's so important to have everything in one place. So I, created my link tree. So if they search Linktree Dr. Tony Hampton, they'll see videos like how to adopt a low carb diet, referrals to places like Dr. Joan Iflin's Reset community for people who suffer from processed food addictions, I write a column for the Diet Doctor. I have a website. So all the things that I do are on that website, absolutely trying to engage and maybe start, since I'm done with my master's in nutrition now, I can probably start making more YouTube videos. So I'm going to really try to put a lot of energy in that space.
Awesome. And thank you both so much for joining me and for what you're doing. Really, I mean, you're the tip of the spear, and really helping the community and helping people out. So you're both a blessing, and just thank you for joining us.
Thank you so
Thank you.
very much. You have an
Thanks,
awesome
I
day.
appreciate you, man.
Yeah, and everyone, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Take these. This is a CME, continuing medical education, life education on, what matters as far as, marriage and stressful jobs. Doctors out there, don't forget about home, don't forget about your kids and your wife and or husband and what matters, and be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.